time, I would always look at runway fashion and just be so confused as to why someone would make something that is just so unwearable. What is the point for it to be so crazy the media is talking about it, to show off how many skills the designer has? Also, why is it so toxic for no reason? And to all of that, I answer yes. So today we're gonna get into the good, the bad, the ugly, and just everything in between when it comes to runway fashion, and also how to maybe interpret it on your own so you can start to look at runway fashion in a different lens. The founding fathers and mothers. For this section, I'm just going to be talking about the very early ye old days of runway fashion. I'm going to get into the more influential shows of like recent times later in the video, but I think it's important to understand the like really old history of runway to kind of see how we ended up as to where we are now. Lady Duff Gordon. After being abandoned by her first husband, James Stewart Wallace, who left her practically penniless, she set up her own dressmaking business and soon became a favorite with society women. Beginning in the 1860s, she was a pioneer for loosening the restrictive clothing that a lot of women were expected to wear at the time. She made less restrictive corsets and also some lingerie, which in the 1860s, that was crazy shit, you know what I mean? As she began to gain notoriety, she worked with a lot of different theaters across London, often creating gowns and costumes to be put to use during the shows. Some believe this may be her inspiration for the walking mannequin show, which is now what we know as the traditional runway fashion show. She also was a survivor of the Titanic. And she was one of the asshole people that paid the crew to leave with the boat with only 12 people in it instead of 40 people because she was really rich like that. While the ship was sinking, the story goes that the angry crewsmen protested that they had lost their livelihoods, upon which Duff Gordon handed each of them £5. Later, however, this action came under suspicion, constructed as bribing the crew not to turn around and save more people. I'm not exactly sure how it became known to the public that she did this, considering like it was the Titanic, like there famously weren't that many survivors, so I don't know really like who exposed her, maybe the crew. But honestly, this did not have that much impact on her career. She continued to have a flourishing career. She's also thought as being one of the first fashion celebrities, sort of what we think of now as like a very high-level influencer. She was constantly in the public eye, throwing charity balls and dressing Broadway extravaganzas like the Ziegfeld Follies. She also wrote a weekly dress article for the Hearst newspaper and a monthly one for Harper Bazaar. Overall, a good way to put her designs is that they were very girly. She didn't favor the style of the flapper, which was very popular at this time, and instead opted for a more feminine, fluffy look. Slowly though, in the later 1920s, her designs began to fade, and the sleek look took hold. Coco Chanel. This is a name you may recognize. Real name, Gabrielle Bonheur. Coco Chanel is known for freeing women from the restrictive clothing of the 20s. Her designs were often sports-inspired with lightweight jersey material. Overall, Coco was known for very functional, simple clothing. Her designs often expanded upon women's fashion, going for more wide leg cut pant and unique tops. For this video, I did not know what Coco Chanel looks like, and she really looks like one of those people that was born to be a supervillain, and she kinda was. While Coco Chanel is one of the most iconic people in fashion of all time, with little black dress, Chanel No. 5, she was also allegedly a Nazi. I don't know if I can really say that word on YouTube, so I'm gonna like not say it again, but from what it seems, it's less like was she or wasn't she, it's more like why was she one? People were unsure if it was like she supported that party's beliefs, or if she was a social climber with a German lover and was just using the times as a way to advance her own career, or if she was indebted to the party because she saved her nephew, most likely biological son, from being held by the party. I think it's kind of all mixed, if I'm not gonna lie. Some people believe that she was actually a resistance fighter and was like pretending to be to give the French information, but then also like I don't know, that theory is very loose and was presented by like her brand basically. A pretty damning example of her involvement though is that during that time she tried to take control of the collaboration that she had with a Jewish business, using Aryan laws as like the backing that for the reason that she should have control over the company. It didn't pass or work at all, really. Luckily, the company was able to hand it off before she could really do anything about it. I mentioned before that she had a German lover. After the war, she continued to see this German lover, who was certifiably a after she fled to Switzerland, because she did get put on some sort of trial for her involvement. Still alleged and undetermined as to why she was involved, but either way she was still involved. So yeah, Coco Chanel was not a good person, but she did have a very influential impact on fashion. Christian Dior, another name you might know if you're watching this. Christian Dior had a slower rise to fame, opening his fashion house when he was in his 30s, which might seem like young, but in comparison to a lot of the other people at the time, this is like a little bit older. Debuting his iconic line, New Look, lavish fabrics, accentuated waists, and voluminous skirts, and a return to the opulence after the austerity of wartime fashion, captured the essence of post-war rejuvenation. It became an instant sensation. With his rise in popularity, he soon turned towards runway fashion. Stone-faced models practicing signature stretch replaced the informal model walkabouts of the past. In early fashion, he was a pioneer of really honing in on the art element of fashion. While he still wasn't making like the avant-garde designs we see today, he really did have a focus on the artistic values on fashion and dressmaking. The Battle of Versailles. The Battle of Versailles is sort of what we see now as New York Fashion Week. It was the brainchild of publicist Eleanor Lambert, who founded New York Fashion Week in 1943, and Versailles curator Gerald Vanderkemp. It was the first ready-to-wear fashion show to premiere in Paris. The basis of this all, however, was that it was a charity event, a place where the extremely wealthy elite celebrities and royalty could get together to raise money for the restoration of the Grand Divertissement à Versailles. Sorry, I butchered that one. That word is really long. This show had designers from Europe and the United States, which was a bit unusual at the time, as they were often kept apart because Europe didn't really have respect for the United States at this time. Outside of the actual fashion show, this week was known for some very elaborate parties. The ladies of the bash were a show themselves. The sables, mink, and ermines checked at the cloakroom could have carpeted the chateau ballroom wall to wall. The gilded chandelier halls were awash with original gowns by designers of Paris, London, New York, and Rome. Easily a 2.5 million worth of evening gowns, gems, and furs poured from the hired limousines that streamed into the chateau courtyard. The actual show consisted of a lot of really popular entertainers. For the US, they had Liza Minnelli. Of course, she blew everyone out of the water with her performance. As for the models, the American designers encouraged the models to own their clothes and make them come alive with their individual energies rather than walking as clothing hangers. 10 of the almost 40 American models that participated in the event were black, and their presence was electrifying and important for many reasons, including representing some of the diversity of America on an international stage. Overall, the event was a turning point in fashion history, really showcasing America as a true player when it comes to the fashion game. The birth and death of the supermodel. In the 80s, models were no longer showcases for fashion, but instead were bona fide celebrities. Popping up everywhere in media, the rise of the supermodel had begun. Where it all began, however, was one photographer looking to transform the idea of models from human mannequin, and instead he wanted to move away from the rather formal, perfectly styled woman who was very artificial. I was more concerned about an outspoken, adventurous woman in control of her life, and not too concerned about her social status, emancipated by masculine protection. With this in mind, Lindbergh gathered all the freshest faces in fashion and put them all together for a photo shoot. And looking at the photos now, you can recognize almost every face without even necessarily knowing a lot about fashion. His photographs were a huge success with Vogue, and because of that, he was able to take his photo shoots to the next level. Lindbergh often used clothes as props rather than as the central element of the shoot, moving away from the idea of models as mannequins. As these new faces began to take over the fashion scene, they also moved into basically every other part of the media as well. They took over magazine covers, music videos, red carpets, and just about everything in between. By the 90s, Gianni Versace saw this vision as Lindbergh had. His fall 1991 show, generally referred to as Freedom 90, after the George Michael song of the same name, he set a new standard for fashion show casting when he had a bevy of major models appear on his catwalk. For the finale, Campbell, Crawford, Turlington, and Evangelista, who had all appeared in Michael's Freedom 90 music video, came out lip-syncing to the song. The first lip-sync for your life, perhaps? This was a turning point for a lot of these supermodels within their career. At this time, we were also seeing these models cross over into advertising, but instead of the only reason casting them just because they're good at their job and being a model, they're also being casted for their likeness and to promote the brand using their identity as newfound supermodels. This carried on for many years, and while some believe the supermodel began to fade by the late 90s, I disagree with that. I just think it transformed. As we went into the 2000s, the Victoria's Secret fashion show was really taking hold. It was one of the most talked about events of multiple years throughout the early 2000s. 2000s. With the first runway taking place in 1995, it was a new wave of what lingerie could be in fashion. Knowing how popular this fashion show would become, it's kind of surprising that when they were initially trying to cast for this show, a lot of models were not keen to be a part of it, as it was like very risque to be seen walking in lingerie. In 1998, Tyra Banks wore the first pair of angel wings, branding the models as angels, which is now closely associated with the brand. The show was a huge success in the 90s, but where it really began to gain traction was in the early 2000s, whenever it was able to be broadcasted on live television. In 2001, which is the first year it was broadcasted, this was also the first year they had the fantasy bra. If you don't know what the fantasy bra is, it's basically just like a bedazzled as fuck bra that costs like crazy amount of money that one model gets to wear each year. It's a very high special honor. People tuned in year after year to watch this performance. They had very popular entertainers, such as one of my favorites being Rihanna. That was such a good show. However, the public slowly began to associate the show with the toxic pressure that these models and also women in society were being put under to maintain these unrealistic standards. While some articles would lead you to believe that these models didn't really do much different to prepare for the fashion show, that is clearly a lie. We all know that's a lie now. Adriana Lima once admitted that she went on a 9-day liquid-only diet before walking the show, which is fucking crazy. Only protein shakes for 9 days. I cannot imagine what your body would feel like. And I remember watching this fashion show at like 13, 14, 15 and feeling very insecure that I did not look like them. This is not an uncommon experience that happens to women in their lives. I feel like most people actually see the Victoria's Secret angels and they're like, whoa, I am so ugly compared to you. Well, now I understand that even those models don't look like that a majority of the time, it still left a lasting impact on my brain. I think it's just really confusing to see the high praises for these women that are extremely thin, and how some people would even criticize these models if they gained like a little bit of weight or were slightly larger than some of the other models. And so then it kind of makes you think, if you see that, like, wow, they're so rude to that model who is literally 5'11" and gorgeous and so skinny. Like, what do they think about me if they think that she's fat? Which I guess is a kind of a selfish take to have, but I think that's what most people feel whenever they are insecure because of beauty standards. The show obviously began to receive a ton of criticism into the 2010s, and in 2017 they tried to do a rebrand of a more inclusive show, but I think the damage had already been done at that point and there was really no turning back for them. Also, this is going to be a crazy controversial take, but thinking about these Victoria's Secret supermodels now, I look at them and it's almost like how I feel whenever I like watch a movie and there's like a superhero where they're like flying or like do some like using laser beams out their eyes, where I'm like, how the fuck do you do that? While it is extremely toxic, it's like insane that people could get their bodies to look like that. I'm not saying it's like good or bad, I'm just saying it's like you really did that. Obviously genetics are a part of it, but like, oh. Anyways, as the show began to lose popularity, we were also seeing the rise of the body positivity and body neutrality movement in regards to fashion and also just culture in general. While unrealistic standards for models weren't really going anywhere, it was more of a shift of taking these supermodels off of a pedestal. In my opinion, 90s to the early 2000s, because there was less access to media than the 2010s, there was only a few people that we could put on these pedestals and aspire to be like, so these insanely skinny, tall, beautiful women were easy to pick out and really focus in on. In the 2010s, when we began to see the rise of the influencer, and while it's not exactly the same, I think there are a lot of influencers who kind of fit into this Victoria's Secret model category. So as we were seeing more and more influencers, it became more normalized, which is also bad in some ways, because at least with these supermodels, you know they were supermodels. Versus influencers, it was feeling more relatable. It took the idea off a pedestal, but then it also normalized it a little bit more. In general, it just began to lose its status symbol, which in turn, we began to see the fall of the supermodel. I went down this section with America's Next Top Model quote, but the only one I could think of was, "We were rooting for you, we were all rooting for you." Oh, that's not, in the sense that, I mean, influential and controversial shows. Let's take a look into some of the most influential shows and also some of the most controversial shows. This is going to span over many years, mostly from the 90s to the early 2010s. It's editor Megan here. I just want to point this out before someone fucking drags me in the comments for it. I say haute couture wrong the entire video until actually the last 30 seconds whenever I'm talking about like wrapping up the video and I say it correctly. I also probably mispronounce some of the other things in this video and I'm very sorry for that. I tried to like watch videos to like see how things were pronounced, but Sometimes the words just don't come out correctly. Also, when I talk about the most influential and most controversial, obviously I cannot name every single one. That would be like so many. So I just picked a few that I found interesting. Thierry Mugler, haute couture, Autumn-Winter 1995. Mugler was a provocateur who always designed with his vision of the future and fashion in mind. He was known for his impeccable tailoring and the use of avant-garde techniques and materials. This collection of pieces is striking. Using light and dark tones to contrast each other, you can't help but be hypnotized. A futuristic but sexy look emulated Mugler's vision of body conscious. Also, body conscious is just the long version of bodycon, which now I think of bodycon, like bodycon dresses where it's like tight baddie dresses, but really it just means clothes that's super tight fitting. The wearer is aware that they are wearing the clothes. That's a mouthful. Anyways, body conscious dressing and innovation in fashion. The most popular piece out of this collection is a dress named The Birth of Venus. Inspired by the painting by Sandro Botticelli, it really does capture the essence of the original painting while putting it into a modern context. Hussein Chilean, Autumn-Winter 2000. You may know this collection by looking at it without even realizing it until you see what actually happens. This show explored the shifting identities of those who cross borders, displacing themselves and their cultural belongings in the process. Chilean's designs were a reflection of the personal, emotional, and political layers that come with the act of moving from one place to another. The garments didn't just sit still, they changed shape, reflecting the fluidity of personal identity in a world where borders are continually redrawn. This collection features different household items that would be later revealed to transform into wearable pieces. A metaphor for how when people are displaced, they still carry the core of their home place with them. It is a very beautiful representation of how nothing really leaves us. It just transforms and sometimes into something beautiful. The piece that I believe most people may recognize, even if they aren't involved in fashion, is the table piece, where the model steps in and turns it into a dress. A feat for functional design that's still extremely impressive today. Miguel Adrover, Fall 2000 ready to wear, was a designer who was ahead of his time. In the world of Y2K, he went at fashion with a different approach. Each of Major Con designer's designs was unique as they were often created with fabrics made from used sheets, towels, and clothes, even designer clothes. In the Fall 2000 line specifically, he repurposed a Burberry trench coat and other big-name brands into his line. This spurred many of these brands to file copyright claims against him. This was an extremely bold thing to do. He often created pieces with the critical eye towards fashion, leading to satirical clothing. This collection is very elegant and simple in my opinion. I think this line would fit in seamlessly with a lot of fashion we're seeing in 2025. Rochas, Fall 2005 ready to wear. I wanted something more sober and restrained, but like the girls have been photographed in the morning sunlight. This line is so romantic. The frills and tones are muted but memorable. It's very feminine, and all the silhouettes are crafted intentionally to accentuate features we commonly associate with the Edwardian silhouette. The tiered dresses, especially this one, I think is so gorgeous. I would wear that in an instant. Louis Vuitton, Spring/Summer 2008. This line iconically featured models wearing nurses' hats, masks, and see-through coats with outfits underneath. This was a collaboration between Marc Jacobs and Richard Prince, who created the painting series Nurses. A great way to sum up the look of this collection is very random, consisting of stark colors, a lot of yellow and purple, which while doing research, I discovered that a part of this line's theme was inspired by SpongeBob SquarePants. So thank you, Mario Ferdino, for including me on that information. With the heavy use of tulle and reflective iridescent fabric throughout this line, it definitely stands out. Another iconic piece within this collection, Richard Prince's reinvention of the iconic Louis bag with the colorful textured look. I actually remember seeing these as a kid, which is kind of impressive that I would literally remember this because I knew nothing about fashion at all. But it's just the colors on it that really stood out. Obviously, it was inspired by SpongeBob in some sense, so it was very childlike, so it makes sense that it would stick in my head. Alexander McQueen, Spring/Summer 2010. This was Alexander McQueen's last fashion show ever, as he died the following year. An absolute innovator with fashion and showmanship. The collection took inspiration from nature, specifically reptiles and the sea, while models were made up with prosthetics that made them look ever so slightly alien. Any little monsters out there will know this show. And by little monsters, I mean Lady Gaga's fan base. Lady Gaga performed at this show, literally breaking the live stream when she was set to perform. This line was most notable for the armadillo shoes, which look like an absolute nightmare to walk in and equally as impressive. After his passing, he actually gifted Lady Gaga 3 pairs, I think, of these shoes. I was trying to find a way to describe the look of this line, but I simply cannot find the words, so you'll just have to watch it for yourself. Rick Owens, Spring 2014. Instead of traditional models, Owen featured step dancers from various college sororities across the US. Owens collaborated with stepping teams from 4 sororities: Washington Divas, Soul Steppers, the Momentums, and the Zetas, to create a performance unlike anything Paris has seen. This collection had movement in mind. The collection featured clothing inspired by historical warrior attire, leaving room for the models to be able to move fluidly while presenting the clothing. Most people remember this show from the strong expression and walks done by the models. This was more than just a fashion show, but a performance. Incorporating dance throughout, this was a showcase of strength. Controversy and fashion go hand in hand. I think you literally cannot have one without the other. While sometimes controversy can be for the better, making people aware of events or ideas they may not know about, but sometimes it also is just straight up offensive and distasteful. So let's look into some controversial shows. Alexander McQueen, Winter/Fall 1995. Alexander McQueen was no stranger to controversy. It has been seen that the designer's entire life revolved around presenting objectionable fashion shows. Thereby, he was referred to as the greatest provocateur of the fashion industry. Fall/Winter 1995, titled Highland Rape, show was particularly jarring. Dressing the models semi-naked with tattered clothes, incorporating bloody and bruised-looking makeup, what seemed to be alluding to a romanticism of the rape of women. McQueen later explained that the show was a reference to his Scottish heritage, the Jacobite Rising, which was a rebellion in Great Britain, and how the Scottish people were forced out of their homes in the aftermath. One of the most iconic pieces of this collection was the bumster trouser, which were pants that were cut so low that the intention was that you would see the person who was wearing them's butt crack. It's not funny because the collection itself is not funny. Obviously, it was extremely controversial, but that being like one of the most like memorable pieces, being like, I can see your bum crack. I think that alone would get some people stirred up about the collection, even without all the rest of the craziness going on. Christian Dior Spring 2000 ready-to-wear collection. In John Galliano's words, he was inspired by the hobos he encountered while jogging along the Seine. Hobos meaning homeless people. That sentence alone just feels a bit predatory, if that's the right word. This presentation put a group of people on display that had never asked for it. Galliano claims to be inspired by the world around him and being able to see the beauty in everything. I don't think highlighting the realities of unhoused people to be wrong, and it could be a good thing to force people who are uncomfortable with homelessness to face reality, but it seems like there was no effort made to have people view the show as an eye-opener to their own privilege. There also seems to be no effort made to help the people who he was inspired by. This show is also very controversial in the way that a lot of people supported this idea, as it was seeing the beauty in something that was very raw and typically overlooked. It does, however, open the door to the question, how subjective art is really allowed to be. Balenciaga Spring/Summer 2012. This is a very short one. To me, this show is just really funny. The show is not even controversial in itself. It's what happened before the show that was controversial. So basically, before the models walked, a bunch of the front row seats that like the very high-end celebrities, editors, people were sitting on began to collapse underneath them. So it's a bunch of just like really famous, important people just like falling and hitting the floor. I cannot imagine how embarrassing. Like, I'm not meaning to laugh at them being embarrassed, but I do think it's kind of funny. They had to stand for the rest of the show because it became a safety hazard, so they made everyone stand. Rick Owens Men's Fall/Winter 2015 collection. Designing this collection with a hole over the groin area of some of his models, Rick Owens was really looking to embrace some childish fun with his Fall/Winter 15 collection. Let's not forget a bit of cheerful depravity, he declared with an appropriate cheer. The clothing in this collection is actually very nice. Aside from the peepholes, a lot of the dark-toned peacoats and parkas have a really strong silhouette, and there's a lot to like about this collection, except for maybe if you got flashed while sitting in the front row. Marc Jacobs Spring/Summer collection 2017. Of course, we cannot talk about runway fashion without talking about some cultural appropriation. This collection featured a 90s rave-inspired theme, as well as featuring mostly white models being styled with faux dreadlocks. The inspiration behind the beauty look hairstylist Guido Palou created for Jacobs was, he explained, ravers, acid house travelers, Boy George, Marilyn, the singer, Harajuku girls, with no mention of the hair's cultural roots. Black beauty and culture has been time and time again appropriated by the media and especially in fashion. To make this appropriation even worse, Marc Jacobs spoke out after receiving backlash, completely disregarding the cultural significance of hairstyles like dreadlocks and braids in Black culture. Dreadlocks, along with other styles, have been disrespected for hundreds of years, so when a white designer just takes this style, then attributes the look to another fashion style that also appropriated the hair, it's just a slap in the face. In today's age, many Black dreadheads go to dreads for uniqueness and expression. Dreads are very popular among youth in retaliation for the beliefs of the old working class society. Dreadlocks are a natural and protective hairstyle, and it would be great to see more on the runway, but I would hope that they are being styled by Black designers who actually have claims to them. It's no secret that runway fashion has pioneered clothing throughout history and still clothing that we wear today. It's created a space for beautiful, wearable art that can be showcased on a stage for the world to see. But it's also no secret that it's built on a racist, fat-phobic ideology. Historically, the fashion industry has been considered a space reserved for one demographic: rich, thin, and white. When runway fashion began to pick up steam in 19th century Europe, there was little to no space for people of color to be involved in the fashion world. And even as time went on, there was not much improvement in the diversity of fashion. It's not that there was no people who were talented or creative enough to make these clothing, it's that they weren't given the opportunity, space, or recognition for their work. Anne Lowe was the first African American to become a fairly renowned fashion designer. From the 1920s to the 1960s, Lowe's unique designs were worn by high society women. Lowe ultimately designed one of the most famous wedding dresses in history, the ivory silk taffeta bridal gown worn by Jacqueline Bouvier when she married John F. Kennedy in 1953. Unfortunately, Lowe never received credit from either the press or the First Lady herself because of her race. There's obviously like a lot of layers that go into that. The other most prevalent discriminatory factor in fashion is fat phobia. While there is technically a logical argument as to why designers need to make sizes the way they do, that argument being that they want the clothing to look like they're on hangers, what makes more sense to me is needing your models to be the exact same sizes so that you don't have to do alterations. Like, I can understand that. However, the sad reality is like that is not the main reasons that designers stick to such limited small sizes. Because of their bias against fat people, some designers don't even want plus size people or even slightly bigger people to wear their clothing. Because if they were more inclusive with their sizing, that would mean they were more inclusive with the people that could wear them in general. And if they're more inclusive with everyone who can wear them, it diminishes the exclusivity that these clothing have. Because if everyone can wear them, then what makes them special? Here's an actual quote by Karl Lagerfeld. "You've got fat mothers with their bag of chips sitting in front of the television and saying the thin models are ugly. The world of beautiful clothing is about dreams and illusions, and no one wants to see curvy women." Whoa. Like, he said that out loud. That's crazy. Right there, he admitted that fashion is not even attempting to be a reflection of reality, instead an illusion as what women should look like. Models like Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, and societies like Paris Hilton were praised for their extremely skinny figure. Brands like YSL became synonymous with heroin chic and the dark aesthetic associated with pretty, thin, primarily white models. Though the look gained popularity in the 90s, brands today still promote this look. While we have made progress throughout time, we are beginning in 2025 to see the inklings of the return of the heroin chic, and honestly, I feel like the best I can hope for is that it doesn't come back in full swing as it was before, because like it's pretty inevitable that's going to come back, but like I don't want it to come back, but like if we have to, let's keep it at a minimum. So now that you've watched this whole video, or maybe you haven't, maybe you have. If you're here, hi. Hey. How are you? Anyways, back to me. Let's talk about how you can actually begin to analyze runway shows and begin to actually see the looks for the beauty and the art and the wearability that they have, instead of just being like, whoa, that's weird. That's such a silly design. Also, I'm not a fashion historian, and what I say here may be like my opinion on how I like to interpret runway fashion. Might not be the same as you, but if you haven't picked up on it by now, let's crash course runway. There are 4 seasons: pre-fall, fall, spring, and resort. Pre-fall is April to May. Fall is September, October. Spring is February, March. And resort is more like late summer, springtime. Pre-fall and resort is kind of like the little sister to the winter, spring shows. It's like not every designer does pre-fall and resort. Kind of just like if you want to, like. Now let's talk about the terms for what clothing design is meant for and sort of like some of the definitions. Haute couture is a word used to describe really expensive clothing made by fashion houses, which is regulated by the French government. There's like only 14 of them. It's very, very limited. And it usually means that it's like one of a kind piece, like really one of a kind piece. Like you can't even buy that shit if you wanted to. Like that is intended for a museum. Couture is anything else really expensive and handmade. These pieces are also usually one of a kind, but they're more accessible. Avant-garde fashion is fashion which exists outside the norm of the typical fashion. God, that didn't make any sense. Basically, avant-garde doesn't mean like, oh, it's ahead of the trends. It means that it's irregular to fashion in general. That's why we see a lot of interesting shapes and materials being used in avant-garde. You definitely know what it is. You can tell when you're looking at it if it's avant-garde. And then lastly, ready to wear is what it sounds like. It's clothing that is made ready to wear, like that the consumer can buy off of the runway. And also typically the most popular items out of ready-to-wear lines are the accessories, just obviously because they're more accessible, because they're cheaper typically. Okay, now that those definitions are out of the way, let's go back to the literal first thing I said in this video. No one could even wear that. Like, what's the point of making something if no one can even wear that? Runways often exist for two reasons. The first is that it is literal art. The goal is not for someone to buy it, but instead to see it as a piece of art that tells a story, sends a message, or is making some form of commentary. The people who can, and I'm not saying it's not fucking crazy for someone to be able to buy these clothing, people that can buy these very elaborate, unwearable fashion pieces typically buy them with intention to put them on display as art or even contribute them to art museums. Which does sound absurd in some way that some person would buy something specifically put it into a museum, because obviously that's like operating on a different level of wealth that most people don't even like know. But I think where people like kind of shit on high fashion, where it's like, how could you even wear that? If you think about it in the same way you think about like a painting doesn't inherently do anything for you aside from like make you sad, happy, inspire you. Like you gain feeling from looking at a painting. It's literally the same thing with fashion. It's just like there is a wearable component to it. So you wouldn't say that a painting in a museum is fucking pointless because it's like you don't necessarily get anything from it. It's the same thing as fashion, in my opinion. Just because something doesn't have inherent use doesn't mean that it's not worth making, admiring, and having a place in society as a whole. The second is that these unwearable pieces are sometimes used as like inspo, a promotional piece to promote their actual collection that is ready to wear that people can buy. It's sort of like if you're like, oh, in summer 2025, I want to curate a really beachy, vibey look for what I want to wear in fashion. So on my Pinterest board, I may put a picture of the ocean and like a really pretty sunset, and it's like, I can't wear a picture of the ocean and I can't wear a sunset, but I still put it there to garner inspiration and like kind of create a mood for the clothing that I'm going to be looking for. So basically the couture fashion is used as a way to like get people excited or sort of showcase what this upcoming line is gonna be looking like. Obviously it's usually toned down for people to wear since it is ready to wear clothing. So let's take an example and break it down. So these first photos are by Christian LaCroix couture line. I also literally just picked this out random off my Vogue app. Okay, and then this next photo is Christian LaCroix ready to wear line of 2009. So the first one's couture, the next one's ready to wear, so the second one is the one that you'd be able to buy. We can see the similar puff of the dress from the first photo as well as the large buttons from the second photo really be incorporated in the ready-to-wear look. Would you see someone walking down the street wearing this? Maybe not. There's definitely other collections of ready-to-wear clothing that is like, you could wear that even if it's a little bit funky. It's like, you could totally wear that. I encourage you to look at some fashion lines, couture versus ready-to-wear versus haute couture. Couture. I might have been saying that wrong the whole time. It's literally 2 a.m. Couture. But I encourage you to go look at some ready-to-wear versus other fashion lines. Like the Vogue app, even though the Vogue app like kind of fucking sucks, but I'm not gonna lie. They have like a runway section, and it's actually really fun to just like scroll through a lot of the lines. Like, even if you're not looking for inspiration, it's just like, it's like encompassing of like, oh, that's what people were wearing at the time. Fashion is very interesting and it's very wide, and the world is very huge. And I only covered like the eatsy beatsy bit of it in this video, I'm not gonna lie. If you like this video, please go check out my other stuff. I intend on putting out more analytical videos in the future. I have one other one out right now. If you have any recommendations for stuff I should talk about or look into, deep dive, just let me know. I'm not opposed to anything. But I also usually mostly just post some fun videos where I sew, talk about fashion. I'm a little bit sillier in those videos, but I really enjoy making videos in general. So I don't know, it's 2 a.m. My back hurts. Anyways, okay, bye!